You're listening to Making the Cut, the mostly true life story of a retired surgeon from 1C Productions.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Seitz, founder and president of 1C Productions. This episode contains explicit language and adult content. It is intended for mature audiences only.
The train took us directly to the ferry for the Isle of Serenity, with only a few stops at affluent communities. I felt I was entering a higher British social class in keeping with my assessment of Victoria. Yet, I worried that these upper-class Brits might be racist.
A whirlwind transported me into a new and wondrous world of genteel, traditional England, far removed from the blue-collar air of Manchester and London's international atmosphere. Our fast commuter train from Waterloo surged out of London like a racehorse at the starting gate. It left behind the great pollution-engulfed metropolis, overtook local trains, rattled swiftly through the iconic Clapham Junction, and rushed by the green Hampshire countryside. The hedgerows and meadows, old garden communities, hamlets and villages, stopping at the affluent conservative stockbroker enclaves of Woking, Guildford, Hazelmere, and Petersfield. Men in suits and bowler hats, with rolled umbrellas and briefcases, disembarked to idling rovers filled with young families waiting to bring them home for drinks and dinner. Victoria, sitting opposite me in a summer suit and sensible 1-inch heels, belonged to the scene. When we stopped at Hazelmere, she told me that her grandmother Dagmar lived there in an old shepherd's cottage, while her aunt Bunt lived in nearby Petersfield. I liked the idea that I might become part of an established British family, and wished I had thought to buy flowers for her mother in Waterloo. The train briefly stopped in Havant and Portsmouth, before finally rolling into Portsmouth Harbour. We quickly made our way to the ferry. When the last passengers had rushed on board, the ferry pushed off into the Solent, sailing past Royal Navy ships and submarine bases, heading to ride on the Isle of Wight, Tranquillity's base. When we disembarked, her mother and her brother Tim met us at the head of the pier, as promised.
Darling, it's wonderful to see you.
There were smiles all around. No kisses, no hugs.
You look well. This must be Marwin. Is that how you pronounce it? I was in Egypt years ago.
It's Marwan. It's a difficult name.
Call me Shirley. Darling, have you heard about Ned Talbot? Now that Janet has passed on, bless her soul, he's inviting every woman in the neighbourhood onto his couch. Oh, such a scandal. Tim is taking driving lessons while he's home from school. Pretty soon he'll be the only one picking you up and driving you to me.
Tim was a gangly, handsome 17-year-old, polite and quiet, with rapidly surveying eyes. Sitting in the passenger seat, he picked his pimples in the rearview mirror. I sat in the back with Shirley, absorbing the wonderfully comfortable family environment. Victoria pointed out various landmarks as she drove the 20 minutes along a coastal road to the village of Seaview in the late daylight. They lived in a semi-detached house, one street from the rolling swell of the Solent. Victoria took my bag up to the front guest bedroom and showed me her room, Tim's and Shirley's. She was happy and radiant, beautiful in a red print dress. She gave me a kiss, more like a peck on the cheek. We continued into the front drawing room.
Would you like a drink?
No thanks, I don't really drink.
A glass of sherry, a gin and tonic. Vicky is having one.
A weak gin and tonic would be fine, thank you.
Well, make it yourself, dear boy. I have to go to the kitchen to check on dinner.
At the bottom of the stairs, she stopped to yell up at Victoria.
Dinner at 8. We are having leg of lamb, your favourite, and I made a pavlova dessert. Darling, do change for dinner.
I changed into a shirt, tie, and jacket, which I had never done to dine in Commonwealth Hall's refectory. Victoria opened a bottle of wine. Shirley carved the leg of lamb. She was a good cook. The lamb with the roasted potatoes and parsnips was excellent, and the pavlova exquisite. Throughout dinner, she monopolized the conversation, chatting enthusiastically about Trevor, how she had gone up to London to be with him, how he might come to the island for a weekend, and so on. This raised questions of when and for how long from one or the other of her children. The response was always ambiguous. Realizing that I did not know the name, Victoria leaned over when Shirley stepped into the kitchen.
Trevor is her on-again, off-again boyfriend.
Shirley, this meal was delicious. Allow me to clean up.
No. You two go take a walk on this lovely evening.
The sea breeze was refreshing. A light fog rolled in from the west, the waves crashing against the seawall, occasionally spraying us as we walked along the narrow path, holding hands. I began to breathe deeply and relax.
I had to make up your bed and get you some towels. Mummy's hopeless when she's this high.
What do you mean?
She's manic-depressive, on all sorts of medicines. She sees a psychiatrist in London who claims it's a chemical imbalance of the brain, not a mental illness. He put her on lithium. She's developed a hand tremor. She shouldn't drink, except she's very sociable.
I had noticed the tremor. I sensed the burden of concern that Victoria was quietly carrying. I wanted to embrace her, to comfort her, let her know that I cared for her. Did she always have this?
The psychiatrist thinks it was brought on by the shock of Daddy's sudden death. You know he designed the Princess, the huge flying boat?
You mean the one Saunders Roe built?
Yes. And my great-uncle Elliot Verdenroe, together with his brother, started the Arrow Aircraft Company in the early 20th century. You know, the one that made the big Lancaster bomber in World War II.
Really? I dreamt of becoming an aeronautical engineer, but I was lousy at math, so I had to follow my other dream of becoming a surgeon.
Oh, you're better off becoming a surgeon.
I did not ask her the reason for thinking that. I felt an intense affinity to Victoria and placed my hand about her shoulder, drawing her closer as we continued our walk along the seawall.
Daddy worked in London, living at his club during the week. He came home on Friday evenings. When we were young, Mummy would dress Tim and me in nice clothes to greet him. She would tell us to be nice children, no misbehaving. If she thought I did, she'd call me Veruca, a wart. We were always sent to bed early so they could be alone. He'd spend the weekend and return to London on Monday morning.
Sounds like you didn't get to see him much. It must have been tough. She turned towards me, and for a moment, I thought she was going to embrace me. We walked on. How old were you when your father died?
11.
Really? My father died when I was that age too, and my mother hasn't been herself since.
Mummy was told he was on the Queen's New Year's honour list. He was scheduled to become a Knight of the British Empire, Sir Robert Perfect. She would have become Lady Perfect. We learned on his death that Daddy had a wife and son in London. I was shocked to discover a previous family and a son older than me. I wasn't the oldest child after all. I'm not sure Mummy knew until then. She claimed from then on that he'd been divorced. I did find out that Daddy left his son some money in his will.
My father told me once that when he and my mother lived in Sudan, They thought of adopting a young boy named Ibrahim. Only in Islam, adoption is difficult.
You'd have had an older, dark-skinned brother.
Not only that, but after my sister was born, they might not have wanted another child, and I would not be here at all. In fact, Mother's close friend, Sister Ruska, who assisted in my delivery at the time she lived in Cairo, told me that Mother considered aborting me because I was an inconvenient pregnancy.
Really? I'm glad she didn't.
The walk led us to the exclusive Seaview Yacht Club, lit up in the dark like a Christmas tree on a rocky prominence. Beyond the stony shore were mermaid yachts, the ones used in club races. Bobbing up and down on the ocean swells in the moonlight, their mast lights twinkled. We were both tired and ambled back along the street of semi-detached houses. Passing a house with the drawing room curtains open, we saw Ned pulling a younger woman onto the sofa. On our return, we found the dishes still on the dining room table and others piled up in the sink. We cleared the table. I stacked the dishwasher, and Victoria cleaned up the kitchen.
Mummy can't manage. It gets worse when she's broody.
In the drawing room, Shirley rose from the sofa, leaving on the TV.
I'm suddenly very tired. I must have nodded off. I'm going to bed.
She looked much older than my first impression.
Good night. Do tidy up the sofa cushions when you youngsters go to bed. Tim is out, so I'll leave the light on.
She walked somewhat unsteadily, to my eye.
There's no food in the house. We'll have to drive to the shops in the morning. I'll cook dinner, or we can go for Chinese. Mummy arranged to meet friends for drinks at the yacht club at 11. She wants you to meet Mr. Walker, a surgeon on the island. We might lunch at the club, or I'll drive you up to the Downs. The view of the sea and the rest of the island to our north is magnificent. On a clear day, we can see the coast of France.
That sounds lovely.
I'm sorry about Mummy. Her moods are unpredictable. She's fine today, but tomorrow she may not get out of bed for a week. I hope the lithium will help.
Who takes care of her when she takes to bed?
Oh, various friends in the village look in on her. Occasionally she has meals on wheels. The nurse across the street telephones me when matters become acute. With my studies, I really have no time to do more for her than worry. Fortunately, our GP knows her well, and one of her friends drives her to see him.
I sensed that Victoria was distancing herself from her mother's illness. I saw no other solution, given the demands of medical school. We kissed and hugged, shyly. I felt her body as I rubbed my hand up and down her slim back. We straightened out the sofa cushions, turned off the drawing room lights, and climbed the steps to the landing in semi-darkness. We hugged once more in the dark. She apologized for the situation again, almost beginning to sob. I held her tightly, hoping she would sense my loyalty and support. My bed was comfortable. Exhausted, I was lulled by the rhythmic sounds of a buoy's bell, muffled by the thick fog. I slept soundly. In the village where we shopped the next morning, the grocer, the butcher, the newspaper seller, and the postmistress all knew Victoria, and asked in a familiar way about her studies and Shirley's health. There was worry on her face when they expressed their concern about Shirley. Victoria avoided the questions concerning her mother by introducing me. Walking home in the gloriously sunny morning of Indian summer, we could see down the sloping streets to the nanny boat, taking crews out to the mermaids in preparation for a race. This would be a good day to race since the sea was placid. Victoria shared more stories about how she and Tim had sailed since they were little. The center of Shirley's social life was the Seaview Yacht Club, festooned with nautical flags flapping in a steady sea breeze that mitigated the heat of the late summer sunshine. Mr. Walker and Shirley sat on the uncovered deck, nursing drinks. He feigned delight at meeting me. He was one of Shirley's generation, dressed in a dark pinstriped blue suit with a pale pink tie. I told him about my desire to become a surgeon. As we chatted, I watched the mermaids maneuver into position at the invisible starting line. On top of the chalk cliffs of Culver Downs, the wind blew steadily across the prominent headland. We sat in the car with a spectacular view of the English Channel, sparkling with 1,000 points of diamond sunlight. The area was wild, protected, and pristine with an occasional flock of sheep. Its utter peacefulness stood in stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of medical school. I could get used to this. Focusing on Victoria, I fingered her hair and caressed the nape of her neck. Thank you for bringing me to such an idyllic place.
Thank you for coming.
I'm falling in love with you, you know. We returned Monday morning. I was haunted by Shirley's manic depression. Was it hereditary? I thought briefly about the 9 o'clock pharmacology lecture I gladly missed for the price of Serenity on the Isle of Tranquility. Well worth what I received in return. My curiosity had been piqued, and my sense of mystery enhanced. Victoria was a woman I wanted to get to know better. I continued to visit the island with Victoria whenever we could to help us manage the pressures and tensions of medical school. Whether it was all the trips or simply a lack of focus, I failed my mid-December pharmacology exam. The Gower Street that separated the college from the hospital widened dangerously in my mind. Failure put a hot pepper up my rectum, as we did in Egypt to motivate a donkey stubbornly stalled in its path, and like the donkey who takes off like a rocket, it boosted my determination to focus on the subject. I was successful in passing a month later. In anatomy, projecting the thoracic and abdominal organs onto the body's surface was critical to understanding their exact position.
Find a partner. Draw the location of the organs on the skin.
Victoria shyly agreed on the condition that I would eventually reciprocate when she reached that stage in her studies. As a future surgeon, knowing the location of organs under the skin, such as McBurney's point in relation to the appendix, excited me. A practical lesson. Saturday morning, Victoria signed into Commonwealth Hall.
Close the curtains.
With my eyes averted, she shed her silk blouse and bra in the dim light. She held a towel covering her front. The desk lamp lit her exposed back. I perched on the edge of a chair.
Lungs.
I outlined them, surprised at how far down her back they extended, an inch below the belt line of her woolen trousers. I impulsively kissed her back along the lines I had drawn.
Stop that. Pay attention. Diaphragm.
I dutifully drew its outline on her pearlescent skin. The diaphragm separated the lungs from the abdominal cavity and was located at the fourth intercostal space, much higher than I could have imagined. I connected the top of it to the lowest level of the lung line. The three-dimensional effect differed substantially from the image I had obtained from the pickled Fred.
Heart. Tricuspid valve. Mitral valve.
To draw the outline and position of the heart, she had to turn around. She timidly moved the towel, exposing a breathtaking left breast at my eye level. I gazed, mesmerized by her pale, silken skin and the large, almost saucer-like brown areola. She kept her right breast covered. It did not figure into this exercise. I was aroused, seeing the nipple of the woman I loved and had wanted to marry since the first moment I set eyes on her. She bopped my head with the manual.
Pay attention. attention!
She shivered with embarrassment, feigning cold when I touched her. I impulsively placed my lips on her nipple, lingering for a very brief moment until she pushed me away.
You really must pay attention.
Sorry. Reverting to my clinical mode, I filed the event away under future desire. Go ahead.
Vena cava, aortic arch.
I negotiated around her towel as she spun around.
Kidneys.
I sketched in both kidneys on her back, then on her abdomen. When it came to tracing the route of each ureter from the kidneys to the bladder on her abdominal wall, she lay on my narrow bed and stared at the ceiling in full control of her emotions. The position of the left kidney was high up under the rim of a ribcage, just under the swell of her left breast, which she kept covered. The right was in a similar position, displaced 1 inch lower by the liver. The ureter's route to the bladder passed closely by her navel and into a lush, black forest of straight pubic hair. I kissed her flat abdomen, running my hand tenderly over its softness. Her clinical control snapped as, at last, I took her into my arms. By late afternoon, relaxed and in a lingering aura of love, bliss, and wanting, we resumed the topographic exercise of drawing various abdominal organs on a belly. I drew in the gallbladder with its characteristic landmark at the tip of the right ninth costal cartilage, the stomach, the spleen on the left, and McBurney's point in the right lower quadrant of her abdomen. Our hunger drew us to an Indian restaurant that was just around the corner. Victoria's cheeks glowed, and her eyes sparkled as she sat opposite me. My heart overflowed with love and bliss, while my fingers tingled with the memory of hidden landmarks. She chatted idly, reflecting her happy state of mind. We served ourselves, only stopping our conversation to concentrate on our food. The steaming lamb curry, okra, and rice were a treat. So different from the monotonous refectory food at Commonwealth and Canterbury Halls. Between eating, sleeping, doing laundry, and my social life, there was barely sufficient time for me to learn. Every free moment when Victoria and I met, our togetherness always led to a tempest of tenderness and an urgency of intimacies. I constantly desired her presence and company, and I was assured by her mutual need for me. Since she was a year behind and still on a 36-week academic year, while mine was 48, our schedules differed. That burden and the endless stress of exams caused us to fall into predictably rushed physical routines. We longed for leisurely hours together, though. Defying our attendance at boring lectures, we occasionally snuck off to a matinee at Piccadilly, showing a James Bond movie or Dr. Zhivago. Whenever possible, Victoria went to the Isle of Wight, where she spent time with her mother, studied, met childhood friends, and did some sailing. I joined her as often as I could. The Perfects became the close family I did not have. When we were apart, Victoria and I wrote almost daily. I became addicted to her letters.
My darling Marwan, I love you so very much. It seems you've been away for days, but it's only 12 hours, my darling. It was so wonderful of you to come for the weekend, and such a lovely long one. Oh, I love you. I do hope you got to your class at the appointed time and that your professors are all nice. Bye, Buck.
I wrote back right away, or more frequently rang her up, because I missed her, and I wanted to hear her voice, which soothed my restless soul. I could not imagine living without her or her words.
I can't wait to be in your arms, let alone to be naked with you, to feel your silky skin and strong body. My only love, forever.
Her letters were my elixir. In her absence, I had playful and erotic fantasies, and when we were together, the urge to merge was overwhelming and without restraint. I was in love, and I was loved, wholly, completely, and fully, at last. Each morning, going to the anatomy department, I passed an antique shop in Woburn Place. A diamond ring glittered in the window, catching my attention.
Pawn 5.
It's a lovely Victorian setting. Platinum, no less. Look how the diamond sparkles. Did you say her name was Victoria?
Yes, it's almost as beautiful as she is.
Do you want to see it through the loop? You should bring her in to size it. Nearly half a carat, I'd say. Well worth the price. Have you thought of surprising her for Valentine?
It's too soon, I think. Not now. Perhaps in the next few months. I looked at the tag. £65. Wow, that is expensive. I am a penniless medical student. Would you take £45?
I'll lay it aside for you, Ducky, for when you are ready. Can you get me an appointment with the neurologist at UCH?
On Saturday, February 13th, 1965, Victoria received a Valentine card from an unsigned admirer. There followed a love letter. The next day, a box of chocolates, and the following day, a single long-stemmed red rose, all anonymous. She showed these to me in the evening, gliding into my dorm room on cloud 9 and announcing,
I have a new admirer, someone who wants me.
I was stunned into muteness, amazed at my apparent insignificance. The purportedly lovesick admirer was a fellow medical student and Bowtie's close friend. Professing his adulation, the admirer invited her for a drink and dinner. Any place in London of your choosing. What chicanery was this?
What should I do?
Do you know him?
He recently spoke to me.
Do you care for him?
I don't know.
What do you want to do?
Would you mind if I accept?
The searing pain of her question froze time. I burned with resentment toward my sudden rival for trying to abduct Victoria's affections. She was only 20 years old. Perhaps I had not given her room to breathe, to develop her femininity, or to explore meeting other men. I loved her too much to lose her. I could not release my grip on her, for it would be like inflicting a wound on myself. She was mine. I had invested my hopes and dreams in her. Her love was restoring my trust in women. She had made me whole. She was my perfect Victoria Perfect. The woman who would be my wife, who would bear my little brown children. I wanted her by my side. Did that not mean anything to her? Had I not shown her my love, adoration, and devotion time and again, and again, and again? Or was I overreacting? Was I being too possessive? Was she seeing how jealous I might be? Was she looking for a commitment? An engagement ring? Losing her, particularly to a fellow classmate, well, I'd be the outsider again. Her Britishness minimized my sense of being an outsider. Life together helped to decrease the covert social harassment that I perceived and the marginalization I experienced. I could not imagine life without her. She was the center of my emotional world. With her, I felt safe and whole. No, you cannot go. I think it would be the end of us. I expected her to be indignant and to tell me, go fuck yourself, I'll do what I want. It didn't happen. She seemed pleased with my response and came and sat on my lap. We hugged. I did not feel victorious or even happy. The very opposite. I felt like a bully. The anguish of my response left me unhappy. We didn't celebrate our togetherness. On one of Mother's infrequent trips from Manchester through London on her way to Germany, I planned for the two women in my life to meet. For this anticipated happy occasion, I bought tickets to see Dame Margot Fontaine and Rudolf Nureyev in their premiere performance in Romeo and Juliet at the Royal Ballet. Mother met up with us on the pavement outside Commonwealth Hall. Mother, this is Victoria. We plan to get engaged soon, and to marry.
Oh no, she's not suitable for you. She's not your type.
I was horrified and embarrassed. I didn't have the presence of mind to tell Mother that she was out of line, that she should apologize to Victoria for a very hurtful remark. In silence, we made our way to the performance in Covent Gardens. I sat stonily in the orchestra between the two women, the one who bore me, the other who would bear my children. Victoria and I should have discussed it afterwards, but knowing her reluctance to deal with or discuss emotionally charged matters, I stupidly let the matter drop. Mother rejecting Victoria felt like she was once more rejecting me, my very existence. I didn't matter. Another wedge between us. I eventually found the presence of mind to realize that Omar's acceptance of Victoria was far more important to me than Mother's. I planned a trip to Vedel to introduce my beloved to Omar. Hello, Omar. This is Victoria.
Ja, wie schön.
Turning to me, she told me in German what a lucky man I was. Omar and Victoria instantly loved each other despite their difficulty in communicating, for Omar spoke no English. Ultimately, I realized I thoroughly approved of my Victoria, and that is what truly mattered.
Victoria and I never talked about what accepting that invitation from another beau may have meant to her, or what it meant to me. We did not discuss my mother's rejection of her either. Looking back on it now, I can see how these discussions would have created an even more significant and emotionally deeper bond. Instead, we continued loving each other in our own peculiar ways. Reflection is a tool we sometimes learn too late in life.
You've been listening to Making the Cut from 1C Productions. Making the Cut was written, produced, and directed by Rebecca Seitz, based on Michael McGead's manuscript, Mastering the Knife. Noah James played Michael McGead. Other roles were brought to life by the voice talent of Nicola Waldron, Trisha Briot, Martin Strassmore, Michelle Tischer, and Irene Budashevsky. Audio engineering provided by Zischer LLC. Making the Cut theme music by Kyle J. Baker. Learn more at makingthecutpodcast.com.